I almost canceled the appointment. It was raining that morning, the kind of soft, gray rain that makes you want to stay in bed and pretend the world can wait. I remember sitting on the edge of the mattress, towel wrapped around my hair, thinking how silly it felt to go to the doctor when I felt fine. Tired, maybe, a little distant, but fine, routine. I told myself just routine. The clinic smelled faintly of disinfectant and chamomile tea. Familiar, safe, I had been coming here for years. The receptionist smiled, handed me a clipboard, asked me how my husband was. I smiled back and said, "He's good." The words came easily, automatically, like muscle memory. In the exam room, the paper on the table crinkled under me as I shifted. I scrolled through my phone to pass the time, stopping on a photo of my husband and me from last year. His arm was around my shoulders. I looked happy. I remembered being happy, or at least believing I was. Dr. Rao knocked gently before entering, her presence calm and grounding as always. She asked the usual questions. Sleep, appetite, stress, I answered without thinking too deeply. Any changes at home? She asked, glancing up from my chart. No, I said quickly, too quickly. She paused. The examination itself was uneventful, or so I thought. But I noticed the way her expression shifted, subtle but unmistakable, not alarmed, thoughtful, as if she were listening to something I couldn't hear. When it was over, instead of rolling her stool back to the computer, she sat beside me. That was the moment everything tilted. "You're healthy," she said gently, "but I want to ask you something, not as a doctor, but as a woman." I felt my throat tighten. I nodded. "Do you feel emotionally safe right now?" The question caught me off guard. I laughed softly, confused. "Of course, why wouldn't I?" She didn't smile back. "Sometimes," she said, choosing her words carefully, "our bodies react to truths we haven't allowed ourselves to see yet. Chronic tension, subtle anxiety, disconnection. I see it often in women who are carrying more than they should." I stared at my hands. They were clenched without me realizing it. "Betrayal," she added quietly. "Even the suspicion of it can live in the body." The word echoed in my head like a dropped glass. Betrayal. I wanted to dismiss it, to wave it away like an absurd thought. My husband loved me. We had a life, a home, plans. Betrayal was something that happened to other women. Women in stories. Women who ignored obvious signs. But as I left the clinic, the rain heavier now, something had shifted. A thin crack had appeared in the image I'd protected so fiercely. That evening, I noticed things I had never noticed before. The way my husband angled his phone away from me on the couch. The way he took calls in another room. The way his laughter no longer reached his eyes when he looked at me. "Long day?" I asked, setting dinner on the table. "Yeah," he said, barely looking up. I studied him the way you study a stranger, searching for familiarity, for reassurance, for proof that the unease blooming in my chest was wrong. But once doubt takes root, it grows quietly. That night, lying beside him, I stared at the ceiling and replayed Dr. Rao's words, emotionally safe. I realized I couldn't remember the last time he asked how I was really asked. I realized how often I had shrunk my needs to keep the peace. I didn't know his secret yet, but my body knew, and somewhere deep inside me, a truth was waking up, slow, painful, unstoppable. By morning, I understood one thing with terrifying clarity. This was not just a doctor's appointment. It was the beginning of the end of the life I thought I had, and the beginning of everything that would change. Once a thought lodges itself in your mind, it doesn't leave quietly. It waits, it watches, it connects dots you were once determined not to see. After that appointment, I became aware of the silences in my home, the pauses between his words, the way conversations ended before they ever began. It was as if our marriage had developed blind spots, whole stretches of road I was no longer allowed to see. I told myself I was being paranoid. That stress could make anyone imagine things, but the feeling in my chest disagreed. It pulsed with a steady insistence. Pay attention, so I did. I noticed how his routine had changed. Morning coffee that used to be shared now happened in a rush. Evenings stretched late with explanations that never quite matched. Meetings ran long. Traffic was awful. Always reasonable, always just believable enough. One night, while folding laundry, I found a receipt in his jacket pocket. A restaurant we never went to, a date he'd told me he'd been out of town. I held the thin slip of paper like it might burn me, my hands trembling despite my effort to stay calm. It could be nothing, I told myself, but nothing doesn't repeat itself. The next discovery came days later, by accident. Or maybe fate had grown tired of waiting. He had asked me to grab something from his car. As I opened the glove compartment, a phone slid out and landed at my feet. Not his work phone, not the one I knew. My heart thudded so loudly I was sure the neighbors could hear it. I stared at the device, frozen, as if touching it would make everything real. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I sat in the driver's seat and cried silently, because some truths announce themselves before you even read the evidence. That night, after he fell asleep, I did what I never imagined I would do. I turned on the phone, messages filled the screen. Hundreds of them, casual affection, inside jokes, promises that were supposed to be mine alone, photos I didn't recognize, a timeline that stretched back months, maybe longer. This wasn't a mistake, this was a life. Another woman knew the version of him I used to know. The attentive one, the curious one, the man who once made me feel chosen. I felt something fracture inside me, not loudly, not dramatically, but with a dull, aching snap. I waited for rage, it didn't come. What came instead was clarity. I understood in that moment why my body had been restless, why sleep had felt shallow, why I had been shrinking myself without realizing it. My intuition had been whispering while my heart begged me not to listen. The betrayal wasn't just that he had lied. It was that he had watched me trust him and let me. The next morning, he kissed my forehead before leaving for work, unaware that the ground beneath him had already begun to crumble. "Love you," he said easily. I watched him walk out the door and realized something terrifying and powerful at the same time. I didn't need answers anymore. I had them. Instead of confronting him, I opened a notebook. I wrote dates, patterns, details, not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. I needed to understand the shape of the truth before I decided what to do with it, and in that quiet documentation, something unexpected happened. My heartbreak began to harden into resolve. I stopped asking for his attention. I stopped waiting up for him. I stopped explaining myself. While he believed I was drifting, I was anchoring myself firmly in reality. The secret had been hidden in plain sight for so long because I had wanted the illusion more than the truth. Not anymore. As the days passed, I felt a strange calm settle over me, the kind that comes right before a storm, but also right before a transformation. He thought his secret was safe. He had no idea it had already set me free. And as I closed my notebook one evening, a single thought surfaced, steady and unafraid. This is not where my story ends. It's where I begin to take it back. There is a particular kind of power that comes from knowing the truth while pretending you don't. It's quiet, controlled, almost invisible, and once I realized I had it, I refused to waste it on chaos. I said nothing. Days turned into weeks, and my silence became my shield. He mistook it for comfort, for ignorance, for the same patience I had always shown him. He grew careless, relaxed in the false safety of my calm. Meanwhile, I observed, I listened, I learned. I began to detach, not in bitterness but in self-preservation. I stopped rearranging my schedule to fit his. I stopped cooking his favorite meals out of habit. I filled my evenings with things that belonged only to me. Long walks, therapy sessions I never mentioned, books that reminded me of my worth. Each small act felt like reclaiming a piece of myself he had slowly taken without permission. At night, when he slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling and planned not revenge, but escape. I researched quietly. I opened a private savings account. I gathered documents. I reminded myself that preparation was not cruelty, it was survival. And something surprising happened. The more I focused on myself, the less he mattered. He noticed, of course. He always did when my attention drifted away. "You've been distant," he said one evening, searching my face. "I've just been tired," I replied, meeting his eyes without flinching. It was the truth. I was tired of pretending. I started to see our marriage clearly for the first time, not as the love story I had defended, but as a structure built on my emotional labor. I had carried the weight, I had filled the gaps, and when he chose betrayal, he assumed I would continue to hold everything together. He was wrong. Strength grew in the spaces where I once felt fear. I practiced saying things out loud, to myself first. "This is not your fault. You are allowed to leave. Love should not require blindness." I stopped blaming the other woman. She was a symptom, not the cause. The real wound came from the man who promised to protect my heart, and instead fractured it with deception. As I gathered evidence and prepared my next steps, I felt a calm certainty settle over me. I didn't want to destroy him. I wanted to be free of him. Freedom, I learned, is the most devastating consequence of betrayal. One afternoon, I ran into Dr. Rao at a cafe. She smiled warmly, then studied my face. "You look different," she said. "I feel different," I answered honestly. She nodded, as if she had known this would happen all along. Back home, I packed a small box with items that no longer belonged in my future. Old notes, shared souvenirs, photographs that told a story I no longer believed in. I didn't cry. I felt gratitude instead, gratitude for the woman I was becoming. When he reached for me that night, I gently pulled away. "Are you okay?" he asked, concern flickering briefly across his face. "I'm getting there," I said, and I was. Every day, my voice grew steadier, my posture changed, my reflection looked back at me with recognition instead of doubt. The woman in the mirror wasn't broken, she was awake. I knew the moment would come when silence would no longer serve me, when the truth would need air and witnesses, but I wasn't afraid anymore, because strength doesn't announce itself loudly. It gathers, it waits, and when the time is right, it moves with absolute clarity. By the end of that month, my plan was ready. My heart was steady. My future no longer depended on someone who had chosen to lie to me. He thought my silence meant forgiveness. He never realized it was preparation. And when I finally spoke, it would not be with tears or pleading, but with the calm confidence of a woman who had already left him in every way that mattered. I chose the day carefully, not out of spite, but out of respect for myself. I wanted the truth to arrive without shouting, without shaking hands or a breaking voice. I wanted it to be undeniable and final. I invited his family to dinner, nothing unusual. I cooked his favorite meal, set the table the way I always had, even wore the dress he once told me made me look confident. He smiled at me that evening, unaware that the last illusion was already dissolving. Everyone laughed. Plates clinked. Ordinary life unfolded in the most extraordinary moment of my transformation. After dessert, I stood and cleared my throat. "I need to share something," I said calmly. The room went quiet. I reached for the envelope I had prepared weeks ago. Inside were copies, messages, timelines, undeniable proof. I placed it in the center of the table, my hands steady. "I've learned that my husband has been living another life," I said evenly, "and I won't be part of a lie anymore." His face drained of color. Confusion turned to panic, then to realization. He tried to speak, but no words came that could undo what was already known. His family looked between us, stunned, hearts breaking in different ways. "I'm not here to humiliate anyone," I continued. "I'm here to be honest with you and with myself." I picked up my bag and added softly, "I've already filed for divorce." No shouting followed me. No chaos, just silence and the unmistakable sound of consequences arriving. I walked out with my dignity intact. The days that followed were quieter than I expected. The legal process was straightforward. Preparation had been my greatest ally. I spoke only when necessary. I answered questions with facts, not emotion. He tried to reach me. Messages filled with regret, confusion, desperation. I didn't respond. Some bridges don't need burning. They collapse on their own. Weeks later, I moved into my new place. Sunlight filled the rooms in a way my old house never had. I bought fresh flowers. I hung art I loved. I slept deeply for the first time in months. One afternoon, I returned to Dr. Rao for a follow-up visit. She looked at me and smiled knowingly. "You're lighter," she said. "I'm free." I replied. She nodded. "Your body knew before your mind was ready." As I left the clinic, I realized how true that was. My body had warned me. My silence had protected me, and my choice, to walk away with grace, had saved me. The sweetest revenge wasn't exposure. It was healing where he expected me to break. It was growth where he expected me to beg. It was peace where he expected chaos. Months later, I heard through mutual friends that his life had unraveled. The lies didn't hold when I was no longer there to cover them. The woman he'd betrayed me with disappeared when the illusion of secrecy was gone. I felt no satisfaction in that, only closure. One evening, I stood by my window, watching the city lights flicker on, and reflected on the woman I had been at the start of this story, afraid, uncertain, shrinking herself to preserve a marriage that was already gone. She had no idea how strong she would become. Everything had changed because someone listened to a body, to intuition, to truth. And I smiled, knowing this ending wasn't about revenge at all. It was about choosing myself, and that choice, quiet, firm, and unwavering, was the most powerful ending I could have ever written.